Welcome back to the Beyond Clean podcast. This episode is a special release of one of our panel discussions that aired during a Beyond Clean conference in 2023. We've handpicked these panel discussions to bring to you here on the podcast as some of the most relevant and engaging discussions from our conferences this year. Covering topics from water quality to human resources, we hope these discussions will help you keep pushing the industry forward. If you like these episodes and want to see some of our other conference sessions, you can check them out online at beyondclean.net under free CEs. Until then, enjoy the show.
All right, welcome back, everybody, and we are here for our final session of the day, and one that I'm really excited to be a part of. Hank was going to be with us today, but he has unfortunately lost his voice, so I'll be stepping in today, which is totally fine because I'm looking forward to this discussion. Wanted to thank our event sponsors, Census Technologies and First Case, for your collaboration. Our speakers today are Sara Vinson. Sara is the Director of Sterile Processing at UF Health. She is a passionate SPD leader with a proven record for developing efficiency and innovation. We have Samantha Espenschied. She is a sterile processing technician with Aya Healthcare. Sam is a highly motivated and dedicated professional with over 3 years of experience in the industry. We have Todd, who's a manager of sterile processing at Norton Healthcare. Brandon is a dedicated SPD leader who strives to provide his team with the resources for long-term success. And finally, we have Justina Tanner, last but not least, a certified sterilization technician at Ascension St. Vincent Hospital. Her mission is to help sterile processing technicians continue to smoothly transition into the technological future of SPD by highlighting the importance of continued education on decontamination, assembly, and sterilization. And we'll just get into it with the presentation title. The title is In the Weeds and the Clouds, a frontline conversation about how productivity really works. Are you ready to take a deep dive into the world of productivity? Do you ever ask yourself, how does it really work, and why is it such a big topic of conversation in our departments and, as of today, our virtual conferences? Our panel of frontline sterile processing professionals are teaming up to share their insights on productivity and the strategies they found to be most effective for improving workflows and efficiencies in their departments. Your productivity questions will be answered once and for all during this thought-provoking discussion. Let's welcome our panelists to the virtual stage. All right, guys. Welcome. Good to see you all. I'm going to start off by just having you talk a little bit about yourself, give us some background on your experience, and how about we start with Samantha?
Hi, my name is Samantha. I have 3 years of experience in the sterile processing field. I started in 2020, back when COVID was in its heyday, and I really got to liking it. And so I made it a point to get all the certifications and increase my knowledge as much as I could. And I ended up really falling in love with, patient safety and getting everything good for, teamwork. And teamwork is really important to me, and I'm really looking forward to the future and seeing where it leads me. I am currently a traveler, and it's been really fun to see the different kinds of hospitals and how all the different kind of hospitals work and what their strategies are and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I know I've been in some departments here in Denver, Colorado, where there's a number of travelers, and they've voiced that not every hospital is the same. Even the hospital system, from one hospital to the next, they're focusing on different different cases. Their caseloads are different, so I think that's good experience. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. It's good to see everybody here today. So I come to sterile processing a little different route than most. I have a agricultural and manufacturing background. Then got into academics, started pursuing that, and kind of fell into sterile processing just to kind of finish my degree. I really fell in love with the work. It really aligned with a lot of my data analysis that I was doing in my academics, and really just kind of fell in love with the team and the steps and the process that we do. I really enjoyed kind of improving processes, and productivity is one aspect that I really led into. And then a few years into my career, I was given the opportunity to lead a team, and then now I'm a manager here at Norton Hospital. So really enjoyed it. I believe, in kind of being a change agent for our industry, and just doing the best we can to take care of patients and improve our processes every day.
Awesome. So did I catch that you're a data guy? I think that fits in pretty well with what we're talking about today.
Yes, I am a data guy. Yeah, my degree was in textual criticism, so I nerd out and geek out over minute letters and details like that. So.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, Justina, how about you?
Brett, I just want to first and foremost thank you and Hank for what you guys are doing here at Beyond Clean. I think it is absolutely phenomenal. Not only is it important, it's a necessity. And hello to all of the Beyond Clean family. Thank you for having me today. I've been in sterile processing for about 2 years now. I enrolled into the St. Vincent College of Health Professions, and I took the course. I had no idea that this is what sterile processing was. However, it has been a journey thus far, and I am learning so much. So glad to be here, and I'm expecting to learn more things as technology advances in the medical field.
Well, thank you, and thanks for those kind words. We actually, I think, our shout outs go out to all of you guys and the people that are on the front lines, and that's why we do what we do. So we appreciate you. Sara, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm currently the director for sterile processing here in Florida. I've been a director for 3 years, but I started my career back in 2021, so 22 years in sterile processing. I actually started as a volunteer at a hospital when I was a senior in high school, and they assigned me sterile processing, and that's how I found it. I knew nothing about sterile processing. I was a senior in high school, and so I started out as a frontline technician. I was probably a frontline technician for about 4 years. I did it when I was in college. I originally thought I wanted to go into nursing. I've always loved the OR, but did some patient care related jobs and went to school and realized that, SPD was truly my passion. So I've stayed with SPD ever since, and kind of just followed the career trajectory of a lead, an educator, coordinator, supervisor, manager, and now director. So I've seen all sides of productivity as, if I'm the technician in my early years being held accountable or, being asked about it, to now I'm kind of setting the expectations and having conversations with staff. So it's been an interesting career, and one that I'm definitely passionate about.
Great. Yeah, I think, we're here for a conversation about productivity, and there's the basic definition of productivity where it's, the amount of work you can get done in a certain amount of time, but it's so much more broad than that, right? And I think that that's why we're here. We're going to dive into it a little bit deeper, but I want to get us warmed up here. And so throw out a little bit of a warm-up question to you. And Sara, we'll just go ahead and start with you. What is your earliest memory of a productivity related conversation with your SPD boss or a new SPD boss?
So I think early on, the first couple years, productivity wasn't really a factor until I got into like a larger academic center where, volume was much higher and productivity became important. And I'm thoroughly competitive. So productivity it didn't bother me, wasn't negative to me, but they actually would post our hourly rate like on our communication board when you walked in. And that was really the first time I had really seen an organization start using and posting productivity, but it was, it had a lot of interesting conversations amongst the peers because you didn't want to be at the bottom of the list. People, didn't really want their information known. But it was interesting how that facility chose to go about publishing, like for everyone to see what your productivity was.
Yeah, just putting it on the bulletin board for everybody to see. I think, the other day I had a discussion, this is a bit of an analogy, but it was going into a gym and having everybody's achievements, posted up on the board. And it can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's also goal oriented too, to where it might get you thinking in terms of what you may want to be doing to improve yourself. And then in department terms, like what can we do to improve ourselves? And then obviously we've got the data piece that we can dive in a little bit more. But Brandon, how about you as far as like, what is your earliest memory of a productivity related question?
Yeah. Productivity was always really important to a lot of the departments I've been in. I will say I had the distinct privilege of starting out my SPD career in an environment that really valued quality over productivity, over quantity. So most of our conversations around productivity, we're trying to match that balance of being productive while maintaining good quality. One particular story I'll say, when I first became a leader in that organization, as a leader kind of leading productivity, I had a unique case where we had one technician who was, in terms of production, far and above everybody else, but his quality was horrible. And I remember talking to him, and he was just so ambitious and eager to get as much done that he would even fight off people to try to grab all the big sets and get them all done. And he would just crush through thousands of instruments a night. And in discussing productivity with him, one of the strange things as a boss that I had to do, I told him he had to be less productive and he had to produce less. And we actually set a cap for him. Hey, 5 lines should not be done with 50 loaners. You shouldn't be able to do that in 4 hours. And so kind of the opposite end of probably a lot of management decisions on productivity. I was having to slow him down quite a bit.
Interesting. Why don't we dive down into a little bit of a rabbit hole on that one? Because we've been talking about quality a good part of the day today, as far as, quality versus quantity. And then there's, going way too fast and, losing that quality piece, right? But then there's also what was explained in one of the other sessions was the proficiency piece, right? Like the more proficient that you are as you grow in the profession, I think that, you can work with both, but what is your feeling on that? Sam, I'll bounce that over to you, and then we'll go back to the productivity question. But what is your feeling on that?
On the quality versus quantity?
Yep.
Yeah, so I actually wrote that down earlier today. I was thinking about quality over quantity. And I know a lot of people that, they do the trades as fast as they possibly can. And, when you're doing more quantity, then obviously your quality suffers because you're not taking the time, taking the care that you need to actually look at every single instrument. So you're going so fast that you could miss something, and missing even just one little thing could mean, life or death. So it's definitely important to keep track of your quality instead of your quantity. And if you can do it a little bit faster, that's okay, but just make sure that you're doing it thoroughly.
Right. Oh, that's a very good point. Sarah, how about you? What are your thoughts on the quality versus quantity side of things?
Yeah, I think it's a balance of both. I don't think you can look at either independently, because say I'm tracking defects and, Sara Vinson made 5 errors and Brandon made 2. Well, 5 seems worse than 2, right? If I just look at just the defects. Well, what if I assembled 1,000 trays and Brandon assembled 200 trays? Well, my defect ratio to productivity is better. So I think there's definitely a balance of combining both. You definitely don't want a technician to be too fast to where they're skipping steps and not following, a best practice for like insulation testing, those types of things. But as long as the technician is proficient and has good quality, we're human, right? So, I mean, sometimes errors happen, but I don't, when I view it as both. They can't be independent. There is quality and quantity that, needs to be achieved.
Right. No, that's a very good point. Justina, are you with us? It's your camera kind of switched off, so I'm not sure if you're here with us.
Can you see me?
We can't, but we can certainly hear you. I want to make sure that you weigh in on that quality versus quantity piece. And then, we'll skip over back to the productivity related question, but do you have some insight on your side?
Just like Sara said, it's really a fine balance that you have to have between quantity versus quality. But I think what needs to also be paid attention to is when you have a huge backlog and you have surgeons, cases are lined up, surgeons are needing certain things. It could be potentially you're short-staffed. And you have to find a way to make sure you're giving that quality while you're keeping up with the quantity, because there are certain techs who are quote unquote perfectionists. They want to check everything, which you should. They want to check everything and want to make sure every instrument is functioning properly. And then you have those techs who feel like they've been here for so long that, they don't even need to look at a count sheet. They know what's in this set. So, as I think it's important to just make sure everybody is on one page about the importance of still having that quality while you're keeping up with the demands of the OR.
Very good points. All right, Brandon, it's on you to weigh in on this since you had us go down this route.
Oh, yeah. So I derailed the panel.
You're fine.
No, I agree with all the panelists. I think it is, we really have to track both. We do have quality demands. We expect perfection, and as best we humanly can possibly get there to provide a perfectly sterile product to our patients. But we also realistically have production demands. We have, like she said, a backlog of sets coming through that we have to get ready. And if you don't have any sets available for surgery, that doesn't do any good. So it is a fine balance. I think every leader and every technician has to kind of, find their place in that continuum to kind of figure out how can we be productive yet maintaining good quality.
Right. Yep. And, I think all of you would agree that the proficiency piece is always there. You want to have the education and training, the familiarity with the instruments that you're working with. You want accurate count sheets. You want, like I said, you also need the data, right? And I think that all goes into that whole circle. Have a couple of questions in related to that from the audience. One from Anne: can a certain amount of tray audits per month help the quality? And I'll throw that over to you, Justina.
Can you see me?
Yep. You're back on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would have a positive effect on productivity because I was just talking to a supervisor yesterday, in fact, and they were talking about how there are technicians who will build a set, especially if you deal with instrument tracking systems. They'll build a set and say that it's complete and it's incomplete. And it could be that one instrument that's missing in that set that surgeon actually needs out of the entire set. So I do think that it's important to specifically have audits on sets that you use every day. like laparoscopic sets, minor general sets, certain ortho sets, and things of that nature. And I think that would help a lot in that situation.
All right. So another question here would be, what qualifies as a tray audit? Checking for sharpness, rust and pitting, cracked lock boxes. I'll throw that over to you, Brandon.
Yeah, certainly. I would say all of the above. I think we performed a lot of tray audits through history. I know, and kind of thinking through quality. Most often, your customer defines quality. But in my experience, often the SPD trained eyes have a keener sense of quality. So I think those tray audits are often really productive in pinpointing better quality metrics. If we only rely on OR complaints, or when scrub techs who find problems and they pass them up to SPD leadership, we're only catching a small minority of potential quality errors that happen. So I think doing internal QA audits is a really effective way to find better trends and accuracy, because what I found, I think me and my leaders typically have a keener eye for quality than often some of our trained OR technicians do.
Awesome. All right. Well, now we took a little bit of a left turn, so let's we'll get us back. I'll get you back on track. But so when technicians hear the word productivity, what things come to mind? Obviously it's a broad topic, right? But I think that this one deserves a little bit of time. So Samantha, I'm going to start with you, and then we're going to go around the table on this one.
All right. Well, when I hear the word productivity, it basically, I think of how efficiently, quickly, and thoroughly I complete a task. And that also goes throughout the entire day. So when I schedule my breaks or schedule my lunches, I want it to be scheduled in a time where I won't be needed as much. So like if you have, 10 workers and there's 3 different schedules for lunch, then make sure that, maybe at least 6 of them are still in the department so that the productivity doesn't suffer. And then also, I know that a lot of newer employees, they don't have a lot of experience with the productivity, and that in some cases that they aren't trained correctly, so they don't know exactly what productivity means. And I feel like training is a really big part of how productive you can be, because if someone hasn't been trained correctly, then they can't really help,
Right. Oh, very, very good point. I think that, when you're being trained, I think you start small and, you go through the process and learn the instrumentation. I think everybody's got a different way of doing it, but making sure that there's that education piece up front to where they really can hone in and be, proficient at their various skills. How about we throw that one over back to you, Sara, as far as, when technicians hear the word productivity, what things come to mind?
I think it depends on the culture of the department, because depending on, how you view it, it can be really negative. Things I've heard in the past is, they're watching us. They don't trust us. They're micromanaging everything that we do. Like, why does it matter if I scan and do this, that, and the other? But I think if leaders are transparent in like the metrics that we're held accountable to, like labor per stat, like what does that mean? Like, how am I being held accountable as a, director manager for budget and FTE, requesting FTEs and things like that? I think it really, whether it's something positive or negative, really comes down to how leadership kind of explains it and teaches the staff and gives them the tools to be successful. So, but I've definitely heard it from more on the negative side than positive.
Yeah, it's a two double-edged sword, right? I think that you want more numbers, you want more productivity, but you could definitely take that in a negative light as opposed to really showing the data points on where you can improve and actually massaging it to where it does seem positive to where you can actually work towards that goal. How about you, Brandon? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think when I first got into sterile processing, like I mentioned earlier, I come from a manufacturing background, and productivity is, just drilled in your head working in a warehouse. It was different coming to, sterile processing because it's not, just simply, drilling a rivet into this, this piece of metal over and over again. So I came into it with that background in manufacturing, just get more and more done. And it took me a while to kind of find that balance. So I would say early on, I probably adopted some of that negative connotation of productivity that Sara was mentioning, just getting more and more done without finding that balance early on.
Right. Oh, that's a really good point. Justina, how about you?
When I think of productivity, I think of the definition itself. I think of as an individual tech, what's your level of effectiveness as far as what you're doing? How much effort are you giving towards reaching your goals? What's the overall quality of your work? And how are you measuring your total output during your shift as a technician? Those are really the four things to me that technicians should really be focusing on, because when you focus on those particular things, you have a higher chance of giving the desired results for our customer, which is the OR, but you also have a higher chance of positive outcomes for the primary person of interest, and that is the patient.
Yep, very good. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? It's the patient, and ultimately that's who is impacted by all of these processes. We talked, Sara, you highlighted a little bit on the negative side of things, but can we dive a little bit deeper on that as far as the productivity and maybe some examples on the negative side? And Sara, since you brought it up, we'll start with you.
I think, again, I think it depends on the individual, and if there's someone who's mindful of how they're spending their time. I think, usually if I've had a conversation related to productivity, it's looking at gaps in time, like, hey, I noticed when I pulled up your report, you've got like 2 hours where, I can't see something was occurring, and staff, I try to come from a point of view where they won't be defensive. It's always inquisitive, like, hey, were you answering the phone? Did you have to make a delivery? Did something interrupt you? And I think as long as you have like a transparent, open dialogue, it becomes less negative and defensive. But it's sometimes hard, because you're essentially asking them to justify their performance, right? Like how well are they doing, and are they being good stewards of their time while they're clocked in? So it definitely varies on the individual.
Yeah, and one of the I don't know if I'd call it a solution that was talked about today was, having teams within the department to answer the phones. Like, so have a team that you are dedicated to answering the phones today, so that one person that, has that tendency to sneak off and answer that phone is not going to be doing that. So, I mean, that could be a way. But, I think in terms of just, trying to measure that can be a little bit tough without somebody getting defensive. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on the negative side of things? I know you mentioned coming from a manufacturer and trying to go too fast, but do you have any other examples that you'd like to share?
Yeah, certainly. I think there are a lot of negative aspects to productivity, particularly in maybe how individuals view it. I think one of the, depending on how a leader communicates the goal in the productivity, and if their aim is just to produce more, I think one negative consequence is, people learning what is the objective that Brandon has and what's his standard. And if I say I need 20 sets per night or a certain number of instruments per night, then the negative side, you get people who are kind of gaming the system and who kind of know, okay, I'll grab these 5 trays that I know are easy and I can pad my numbers real quick. And I think that's a negative side of productivity. People who can, depending on how you communicate it, they can learn how to kind of fly under the radar, meet the bare minimum of productivity, even though their peers and leaders could observe they're actually quite unproductive in some ways. I think another fruitful part of the discussion would be for, how are we tracking some of those ancillary duties within the department? It's quite easy to document and to identify how many sets were sterilized in a shift or how many peel packs were packaged in a shift. But it's really hard to quantify how many times did you, like you said, answer that phone or deliver an instrument to the OR? Do you have means to track that and identify that? Or restocking shelves, all these what would be considered non-productive aspects of work. How are we tracking that? And so I think that could be an aspect of negativity is, how do you define these things and people who can, kind of exploit the system that's ill-defined?
Right. No, good answer. I think, the negative side of things can always be turned into a positive if you're presenting it right, like Sara said, and if you're having that sit down and just saying, this is what we're seeing, how can we change this so that everybody else is affected in a positive way? So, those are all good points. So stepping a little bit further, when department leaders are dealing with productivity issues, what all does that touch? So how about you, Justina? Do you have some insight on that?
My insights on that, some of the issues that you can have dealing with productivity is, like I said before, high backlogs. That could be a huge damper on productivity. How fast are your turnaround times? When you have a certain physician that's here and they have cases back to back, are the needs being addressed promptly in your department when there are a bunch of add-ons that come down? Are you working to make sure those are being focused on outside of the priority sets that you have? And also, are technicians properly trained in the process? I think that is huge in our department anyway, and we put a lot of emphasis on that. If you are a technician and you do not understand the process for whatever point you are at in the department, whether in decontam, whether you're in assembly, whether you're on the sterilizers, or you're in case cards, there is a process to each of these areas. So those are the main points that I sort of thought about.
Right. Oh, very good points. And, we also touched on leadership today, and, that goes into the training process and the onboarding and the continued education piece and making sure that your team is empowered to learn and to grow within that, because it's, you can't be productive unless you can grow, in my opinion. And so I think, it goes all the way back to that proficiency piece. As far and talking about the productivity issues, when department leaders are dealing with those, and I think Sara, you'd be a good one to address that question too. So what are your thoughts there?
I think if it's an individual or department as a whole, it's really understanding what are the barriers to being productive. You already just touched on training and education. Is it because I have really high turnover and my staff are all brand new, so they're not going to be as fast and proficient because they're still learning? Do I have really poor count sheets? So it's really hard to figure out what's needed and take a long time. Are my trays coming down mixed up from the OR? That never happens, right? So, that slows me down because I have to stop and find where all my things are because they're mixed in, 5 other trays. That slows us down. So one, never assume the negative, figure out what the barriers are and then make sure that you're working to fix them. Now, once you fix them, then that makes that conversation a little bit easier. To your point, we've assigned Sally to answer the phone. So Sara, you don't need to answer the phone anymore. So what is hindering your performance? But I think always starting with why, asking why, and then kind of problem solving from there is always usually helpful.
Yeah, great. I think removing the barriers is a really good money quote right there, because I think when you're doing that, then there's less for them to feel that they're impeded on. Samantha, how about you? When the department leaders are dealing with the productivity issues, what are your thoughts on that topic?
I think for example, the last hospital I worked at, there was a lot of inventory issues, and there's always cases of everyone or some nurses in the OR accidentally throwing out instruments, or a lot of instruments breaking because they're not cared for properly. And so the last hospital I worked at had a lot of inventory issues. So there were a lot of trays down, and they weren't getting replenished quickly enough. So at one point there was just a whole wall of down trays. And, inventory is like a really big part of, if you don't have this specific instrument that they absolutely need for this tray, then you can't do anything with it. So I think that's a really big point of productivity as well.
Right. Yep. Very good point. Brandon, I'm going to throw this question over at you. What is the perception you have on the other side of productivity, as a non-productive employee? So you've got somebody that just isn't getting it, maybe needs more training, or just isn't meant for the position. A non-productive employee can have a ripple effect in the department. So thoughts on that, the other side of that coin?
Yeah. So the other side, we tend to highlight the high performers and those who are doing well and are very productive, but it's inevitable. And on every team, you're going to have staff who are not productive, and they're not, really pulling their weight. And this could be for a number of factors. It could be because they weren't trained properly, or they weren't given the tools to succeed. So, in my leadership, when I've come across staff who are, I'll look at the data, and I know that sometimes data, can be skewed and it may not paint the full picture. Like Sara mentioned earlier, there are tons of these little kind of gray hollow spots in our data from these ancillary tasks that might not be captured with your tracking system. So, my goal has always been, to find that barrier, like Sara mentioned, is to call them in, talk through it, and see what tools can I provide to help them improve. So, I've had employees who I realized, hey, they were never properly shown how to do this process. So they're uncomfortable. And some people, when they don't know what the next step to take, they don't take a step and they wait to be told what to do. Right. So, I found providing the tools and the resources they need to succeed. And then, just being consistent with accountability and working with them, trying to see them improve. And if they don't, we need to be honest with our assessment that, sterile processing isn't for every person. Not everyone can kind of meet the demands of our department and kind of the workflow that we have to work under. And the goal would be, to try to find a place for them, whether it be an assignment within sterile processing that may fit their skill set better, or maybe another department outside of your department, within the hospital that may be a better fit. And so my goal is always to really, put people where they are the most effective. And if they're not effective, trying to find that for them.
Right. That's great. A great point. It's the old put people in a position to where they can succeed. And, if they're not comfortable somewhere, then if you can, and using the leadership and management styles that you have on board and throughout your team to really give them that encouragement to grow. And like you said, it may not happen, but at least you're giving them the tools and you're giving them that push forward. Justina, what is your thought on that side of things with a non-productive employee?
I am absolutely with Brandon on this one. When we think of a non-productive employee, we think of somebody who just doesn't care, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind. They don't care what they're doing, or they've been here for so long that, you know, they're all about office politics. They go around talking to everybody. They're really not focused. And but that may not necessarily be the only type of non-productive employee. I think that with leadership, at least what I've seen, you have to take the time out to assess a technician's strengths and weaknesses. There may be other underlying reasons why they're not performing the bare minimum, whatever standards you have in your department. And some people can go and you don't need to hold their hand. They're just independent. They don't need to be told what to do. They are action oriented and they need little to no management at all. Then you have the other ones who may be a little bit more timid when it comes to sterile processing, because there's a lot you have to know here. Your mind, it has to be going at all times. There's little to no room for mistakes in this field. So some people just need that extra push. They need those words of encouragement. Some people need you to be there by their side and tell them, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep going. They may need it a little bit more often than others. So I think the best thing to do is sort of sit people down individually and let them talk to you and see what they need help with.
Right. Well, and we're dealing with people, right? And there's life outside of work, and we don't always know what everybody is dealing with. There could be something in their personal lives and that makes it more challenging for them to do their job at work. So it's like, we keep saying it's our job to figure it out and to really dive deep with the people that we have in our departments to really try and help them move through it. So when we talk about productivity and SPD, what are the common expectations that you set in your departments? And Samantha, I'll start with you.
All right. So I've seen leaders set goals of 10 trays per day per shift. And then I've also seen other managers set goals of 40 trays per shift, 40 trays per shift. And it's kind of, for me, it always was a little bit not detailed enough. So in our systems, when we go to complete a tray, we have, it states how many minutes this tray should take to be completed. And a lot of the times, even a simple tray will say 0 minutes. And then an extensive tray, like a major set or ENT orthopedic tray, will also say 0 minutes. So at the same time, what's to stop an employee from just doing 40 batteries or 40 major sets? So I feel like there could be a lot more communication in the workplace about what exactly is expected. Sometimes it's not very clear. Like when I first arrived at the hospital, fresh off the street, didn't know anything about sterile processing, productivity was never explained to me. So, I didn't really know exactly what to do, how much to do. I was just kind of doing what I was told while we were doing it,
Yeah, and you make a really good point, because not all trays are created equal, right? We have so many different surgical procedures and different instruments, and an ortho tray is not like a labor and delivery tray. They're all different. And so to just have that gray area expectation of 40 and 10 without really drilling down into the details and the data behind it is not necessarily the best expectation, in my opinion. Brandon, what are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I agree with Samantha there. It is really difficult to give kind of a general outline. Even though I admit it's difficult, we still do it. We still kind of communicate a general, and we're very clear, is an overstated, oversimplified guideline of, a certain number of sets per hour or a certain number of instruments per shift. As a leader, as I work with my supervisors, we understand there are lots of obstacles. There are challenges that will come up throughout the day, and we kind of work through those. I'm personally a big believer in setting labor standards, kind of like Samantha was mentioning, that this set is coded and your tracking system knows it should take X amount of time. You add a slight buffer in there. As best we can over the past year and the years to come, I'm trying to, really individualize those so that way you can even kind of pair it with the skill set of the person and their training level and their competency level. So I think there's tons of opportunity. I mean, admittedly, it is very difficult to perfectly document and predict productivity. But I think through setting labor standards and kind of following general practices, we can at least get a good start.
Yeah, those are all good tools. How about you, Sarah? What are your thoughts?
So it's a double-edged sword sometimes, because if you set an expectation that's, it's a minimum of X, whatever the number is. You said 10 or 40, Samantha. But if I say it's 10 and I reach 10, well, do I stop because I've met the goal? So I think if you set a pace, some staff will work to the pace that you set. So sometimes it's better just to monitor what you were saying, Brandon, like individual performance based on their experience level, what they've historically done, like what's an acceptable range, for that task. And then kind of just monitor for consistency. Obviously we have goals, labor goals, I'm saying with my director hat on, I have X number of FTEs and X number of trays that have to be done and ORs that need to run. So, there is a goal and a target, and you don't want to be too arbitrary with it because then staff don't really have good direction of where they're going. But I think, it has to be the whole picture. So not just tray, it has to be how many instruments are in that tray. Is it super complex or is it general? Which some tracking systems are getting much better at being able to kind of flag and classify, like what's the, complexity level of this particular item. So I think that's a good thing that the industry is kind of moving towards, is like ranking complexity and giving credit where it's due for, that type of productivity. So.
Great. Yeah. That's the double-edged sword. I love that analogy. Justina, how about you?
I say, well, not a quote unquote leader yet in the department per se, but I think that the main expectation that is probably one of the most important expectations that should be set in any department is to know your instrumentation. There has been several different occasions during huddle where we have sets that go all the way up to the OR and they end up coming back down because there's the wrong instrument in the set. There's a tractor that's too big for a sheath. Or, for example, yesterday at huddle, we had a basic cysto set, and this is a common error that has been happening here lately in the last few months, where they're taking the sheath and it has stop clocks in it. And they're the people in the techs and decontam are completely unscrewing the stop clocks off the sheaths and placing them somewhere else. So when they get on the assembly side, I guess another tech is just looking at it and going, oh, okay, I guess it's supposed to look like that. So they'll put all the stop clocks in this little bin inside of the mesh container, put the sheath here. And when it gets up to the OR, the scrub techs are like, what is this? That causes a delay in cases, which overall can cause a delay in productivity, on your productivity. So know your instrumentation. What's the difference between a Gemini clamp and a right angle clamp and an Adson cerebral clamp? They all look very similar, but they're all used for different things. Know where your reference numbers are. Know how to look up the reference numbers. Use your resources, your IFUs, one source. We have one source here. But make sure you are continuously learning about your instrumentation, because that's where the basis of a lot of our issues lie. So, yeah.
Yeah, very good. I think I can't stress the continued education piece enough. And it doesn't stop at the beginning. It doesn't stop, midway through your career. We're always learning, always relearning and retraining ourselves. And, it doesn't matter if you're, a first year tech, a 5-year tech, you just need to continue to familiarize yourself, because we've got new technology, right? It's going to keep coming, and it's coming at a rapid pace. So that's a very good point. Man, the time is flying by. We've got about 10 minutes. Samantha, do you got something to say?
Yeah, I actually wanted to add on to Justina's point. From a traveler's perspective, I noticed that when I go to new hospitals, they kind of expect us to know everything already when we walk through the door. And obviously we're not familiar with that new situation. We're not familiar with sometimes their tracking system, and we're not familiar with, how to find those reference numbers, because it's a whole new environment for us. And I feel like it's important to, even though a traveler is an experienced technician and they should know everything, right? It is important to still maybe not exactly do the
the full onboarding process.
Not the full onboarding process, but at least make sure that they know, where to find these very important pieces to the puzzle, just so everyone is informed and not only the permanent staff. Yep.
Yeah, great point, because not all department footprints are the same. They don't all look the same. Storage is not in the same spot. Sinks are different. It's all different. So I think, that's a very good point. That, I always like to coin it as every location has a different language. And, maybe the instruments have the same names and everything, but there's a different way of pointing direction and different tracking systems. Just orienting yourself in the department for one is a big thing. All right. Well, we got about 8 minutes left, so I'm going to try and hit on some good key questions here. So for leaders, where are the gaps in how departments capture, evaluate, and utilize productivity data today? And how do we address those? So Brandon, I'm going to throw that at you, because you mentioned your love of data, and then we'll hop over to Sara, and then we'll go around the table.
Yeah. So my thoughts on that, data, we've said a couple times, is a double-edged sword, because it's really challenging, because there are so many facets of what we do in sterile processing, and how productivity looks in one department, like you mentioned, is different than another's based on their footprint. And even within the same department, how productive someone is in decontam is quite different than how they could be in prep and pack or sterilization or the myriad of other tasks that we do. So I think probably the biggest gap in our industry, I think, is really having well-defined standards. Not only because we're leaders and departments are kind of left to our own devices to figure out what productivity looks like for us. Now, that may be the nature of the beast, because a manufacturer of a tool cannot tell you exactly how long it will take with your equipment. But I think that a gap in the market could be, looking at ways we can standardize and get more detailed research on, what productivity really looks like with a certain manufactured piece of equipment or device. In terms of capturing that data, there are tons of tracking programs on the market, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. I think, the key for any leader is trying to utilize what they have to the best of their ability, trying to exploit those resources to better analyze, and being humble in the sense of knowing, it's not just data and numbers on a screen, that we're dealing with people who are overworked, who are stressed out by, personal life and just the demands of their department, and kind of try to balance those two things. As a data analyst kind of guy, I can err on the side of looking at numbers too detailed and trying to figure out exactly how these reports are running and what's the thought and language behind it. But really, I think the goal of being leaders is trying to take that data and applying it to their leadership and just holding people accountable and being understanding and fair and reasonable in how they communicate those expectations.
Great points. All right, Sara, you're up.
All right, I'll try to be quick because I know we only have about 5 minutes left.
Right.
I think similar to what I said before, gaps in productivity and how we can improve it is related to like removing barriers, right? So like I'm in the process of constructing a new SPD. And so some of the things that make us really inefficient today, we're trying to fix with the layout and design of our new facility. So like one example of like what slows us down is we share one printer. So if you have multiple people like who have to walk from their station to get their count sheet every time, like that really slows you down. Like that's something, easy that we can fix by just workflow and design. So I think if you're having challenges or struggles with productivity, there's things you can do that aren't even related to just the staff being faster. It's about how do you make your processes more lean and eliminate like a lot of that non-value added stuff that just kind of gets in the way, which honestly would make the staff's job easier, and more enjoyable if it's they have the tools where they need them when they need them to do their job. So,
right. Yeah, I guess you could say do more with less if you want to say it that way. But all right, Justina, how about you?
I've sort of just brainstormed and wrote down two things that I think causes the gaps in productivity. And Sara was just talking about the lean process. And I definitely agree with that. That actually needs to be implemented more in a lot of different facilities. There's places I've gone to where they don't even have tracking systems at all. And I think that is such a huge help, especially when you are dealing with a lot of different surgeries during the day. So basically non-existent tracking systems in some of these facilities is creating a huge gap in productivity. Then you have outdated equipment, right? Stuff is always breaking down all the time. I mean, even here, we have like 6 steam sterilizers, 4 low temp sterilizers, and something's always breaking down. And they're like brand new. So
it's not always people, right? C-suite, we need budget.
Yes. And I went to one facility. It was a small surgery center. I mean, they had the autoclaves that you kind of like twist off, like Austin Powers. It's just really outdated. And I was just like, okay, this is taking up a lot of time where, I'm constantly getting burned because I got to stick my hands in there to get the set out. And so anyway, so non-existent tracking systems and outdated equipment and the facility's inability to keep up with robust technology.
Yeah.
Right. So
those are 2 very good points for sure. Yeah. Samantha, how about you? And then I'm going to squeeze in one last question and I'll let you go and enjoy your Fridays.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to talk again about the training in the hospitals. In some hospitals that I've been to, they don't have, they'll have the educator, but the educator won't be the one training the new staff or existing staff. So sometimes it'll be the person or the staff that's been there the longest. And sometimes when we've been there for so long, we just automatically do our process and we don't think about why we do it anymore. So when you go to train another employee, you don't really get the full aspect of how and why this should be done this way. So like in decontam, if you're training someone in decontam and not showing them how to put the stringers on correctly so it can go through the washer, and then there's just a bunch of instruments just piled up on top in the instrument and it goes through the washer like that severely decreases the productivity for the person that's trying to assemble the tray, because now they have a pile high of instruments that are just scattered around, and now it's going to take them an extra 20 minutes to try to sort that out. So I think it's very, very important to get the right people to train the new and existing staff.
Very good point. All right, you guys have time for one quick rapid fire question. Can productivity be used for recognition purposes? And Brendan, I'll start with you.
Yes, yeah, I certainly think, productivity, high performers should be recognized for their work. And I think if you have the data to back it up, I think you should recognize those. But I think, based on our discussion this evening, we've kind of seen we need to be careful with how we present that data. I would agree with, the cautionary tale that Sara mentioned at one of her previous departments. I wouldn't advise posting it blindly, but I think you can use, you should recognize those who are highly productive.
Awesome. Justina, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I think it encourages healthy competition, and it also encourages technicians to improve the way that they work. But also, the bad thing about it is it can encourage jealousy and envy among technicians. So I would surmise that you could possibly pull someone to the side and discreetly let them know, hey, you're doing a great job. Or if you do want to make it a team thing, maybe what we do here is we have a chart sheet and we configure everybody's numbers over the entire month, but we don't use their names. We use their employee IDs. So that way it kind of makes it to where nobody knows who anybody is. We just see the numbers. So.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, Samantha.
I do think it's a good practice to share productivity with the group. I had a manager specifically at the end of every shift they shared a group huddle for the shift, and they always had one or two employees that were MVP of the day, like most valuable employee. They had the most productivity. They went above and beyond. They did something that they didn't have to because they were dedicated. And not only did they get called out, they also got points that they could use, like with their badge, so they can buy lunch or whatever they wanted to do with it. And that encouraged everyone to kind of step up their game, because like, oh, you're offering some kind of prize here too. And so everybody was more motivated and everybody started stepping up their game. And then when that manager left, the new manager kind of didn't keep that going. And I definitely noticed like a severely decreased productivity levels, just because, nobody was getting any kind of praise for doing a good job. And so why would they try? Kind of like,
Good point. All right, Sara, I'll let you close us out, and then we'll wrap up the conference.
Yeah, I think as long as you're going to set up a rewards and recognition system that recognizes everything, right? So, who had zero defects, like who, got a kudos for good customer service, good productivity. I think it is a motivator, or at least it is for me. And for those who it's not, then it's a good conversation piece to have with them to say, this is where our peers are. What other goal can we recognize you for that maybe will motivate them in a different way? But I do think recognition can be a positive thing for sure.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we went over a little bit, but it was a really good discussion, and I wanted to make sure to get that piece in to close us out. And wanted to thank all of you for joining us today, Justina, Samantha, Sara, and Brennan, for hopping on. I know it's probably the end of a busy week for all you guys, but we really do appreciate everything that you do. And I can't extend my thanks enough, because my family, myself, have been, involved in multiple surgeries, and you guys are on the front end of that. So I really do owe you a lot of gratitude. So thank you all for what you do. And here we are, everybody. We are at the end of our conference, and I wanted to just extend a sincere thank you to our event sponsor, Census Technologies, and our event collaborator, First Case. I want to recognize all of the attendees and thank you all for joining us. We had some really great engagement, a lot of good questions, a lot of good comments that you can feed over to our presenters if you would like, if you have some other thoughts or ideas that come to mind at the end of the day. And I want to remind everybody to keep fighting dirty, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.